Hi, I'm Carolyn Jardina. Thank you for joining us for this special episode of the Hollywood Reporters Behind the Screen. We will be examining how Hollywood's creatives are navigating through the corona crisis and how we can get back to work. So welcome to our panelists. I'd like to introduce each of you. We have Segun Akinola, who is a composer, credits including Doctor Who. Welcome.
Hi.
We have Amy Williams, production designer, whose credits include Little America.
Hello.
Hi, Amy.
Hi.
We have Hiro Koda, who is a stunt coordinator on shows including Stranger Things and Cobra Kai.
Hi, guys.
Greg Middleton, director of photography. He's a Game of Thrones vet, and he did Watchmen. Welcome.
Hi.
And thank you for joining us, our VFX pro, Marshall Krasser, who did the new series Upload.
Hello, everyone.
So first of all, how are you, each of you?
Doing awesome. Enjoying what I can during this quarantine.
Well, Hiro, you're in Colorado, and you have taken on farming as one of your hobbies. Tell us about that.
I live in Montrose, Colorado, which is it's a pretty small little farming community. It's about 6,000 in the altitude area. The air is clean. It's nice. There's not a lot of people around me. I live on 10 acres, so my neighbors are pretty far away from me. But we've got a lot of land that had some dirt on it, and this time that I've been able to be home, I've been able to start learning how to farm a little bit. So we're getting some grass, and we're going to have hay out there for, I don't know, for the local horses and cows and things like that. But we're tired of looking at dirt, so we're trying to figure out this whole farming thing, which has been a lot of fun.
And tell us how you're navigating work during this time.
I'm a second unit director, stunt coordinator, and I can't really get my stunt team together for what we're doing. But I'm able to communicate with them and just collaborate on ideas and try to work out what we're doing. I mean, we had started season 4 of Stranger Things before we got shut down in Atlanta. So luckily for us, we've able to have all of our scripts, and I'm able to prep and prepare as much as I can before we get back to work. I've been collaborating with the visual effects team. I work closely with them quite a bit, and so we've been able to communicate often on different sequences that are coming up and what we're going to be able to do when we get back to shooting. Season 4 is going to be epic, though.
Okay. Well, you mentioned visual effects, so why don't we go to Marshall? Marshall, you are able to do some work remotely. Would you tell us what's possible and how you've been working?
Absolutely, yeah. Basically, within 3 or 4 days, our entire office went 100% remote. So we were slogging out of the office with monitors and everything else. So we end up logging into our home machine our home machine meaning at work from our home machine, and we can just it's like we're practically in the office. There's a little bit of a lag that happens occasionally, and sometimes the resolution becomes an issue, but as far as getting the work out, we're proceeding through that. We've got a few projects we're wrapping up, and in fact we're just starting right now on a new Christmas project. That one luckily was already in the can, and just working through that. So the only kind of drawback for me is I just can't walk around and chit chat with people as easy, but we are using kind of some video communication. So we could call someone and pop in on them and talk to them if we want to. You just kind of miss a little bit of that lunchroom chitter chatter and gossip. That's kind of what you lose. But other than that, it's been, knock on wood, pretty seamless and kind of painless for us.
How have the clients been handling things like security?
Well, like I said, since we're running through our work machines, everything is pretty much locked down. I mean, we're, of course, all under NDAs. We have to have our home office should be an isolated room where we can kind of keep the door shut and, keep people out of it. So I think, it will be interesting to see in the future how, the security can be maybe broadened to allow more of this, because what we're finding is some of the artists actually prefer and function better being at home for various reasons. I myself am not a fan of that, but it might be something that I could look at too for a day or two here, and if I can ever get to my remote cabin where my buddy's got satellite Wi-Fi, I could actually do work in the middle of the wilderness too.
Oh, that's awesome.
Segun, you're in London. Tell us about your experience right now.
Well, similarly to, I think, most places, any kind of project, film or series for which there's still been some filming, it's all been shut down. And any project for which they were just able to wrap just beforehand, it seems that they're able to get editors working from home, get the sound team working from home, get composers working as well. So they're still able to keep going. And in some cases actually have final mixes from home as well. But for the rest of us, myself included, because I was working on something for which there was still some filming that needed to be completed, it's completely stopped. And of course, there's a lot of speculation about when things can get going. But as Marshall had mentioned, there is this whole question of, but when things get going, what's going to happen? Because everyone's going to be vying for the same amount of space and time, whether that's in terms of studios and on sets or locations. It's going to be very, very interesting to see how things get going again.
For what you do, what do you see as possible remotely? Are you looking into doing any kind of remote recording or things like that?
Yeah, absolutely. And for me personally, remote recording is something that I have actually always employed. So it isn't unusual, except when it comes to anything that's even vaguely orchestral, then usually I don't do remote recording, but for guitars and drums and other things, I have done it in the past. And I think that's where things will be, well, I think that's where a lot of composers are finding things interesting, where they are creating a sound which is vaguely orchestral or is meant to be orchestral, and actually they can't hire an orchestra. So I know there are a lot of people experimenting with actually getting a number of individual string players to record everything. And it's not the same as an orchestra, but it's as close as we can all possibly get at this time. And that comes with certain difficulties and challenges, but everyone's just doing the best that they can to make sure that they can do the work to the highest standard possible. It's great for musicians. It keeps them working as well at a time when they can't perform. And so they're relying on being able to record remotely as well.
Okay. Amy, you were in London and then you came back to New York. What's your experience been?
It was, like everyone else, it was fairly abrupt. We were on a Netflix. I was on a Netflix series called Tea Time, and we were 8 weeks out from filming. Heavy into scouting, designing sets, crewing up, all of that sort of thing, and it all came to a quick halt. And there's not much I can do remotely as far as production design is concerned with the rest of my team shutting down. So, I miss it.
Yeah.
So what are you having meetings with your agent in the meantime, or with your unions? What sort of professional?
A lot of, conversations with the showrunners as, they're taking some time to rewrite the scripts, and, ideas are coming about of how to adapt this to a more, COVID atmosphere, removing extras, removing certain scenes that have large crowds. And I'm doing a lot with the Production Designer Collective, which is a group of production designers. We've been meeting with other colleagues to kind of talk about collaborations. I think this week we're talking to some cinematographers. We've been talking about visual effects and just, workflow. And I've been promoting a feature called Tigertail. So that's been really fun to get to talk and see and share something with the world when we're not really producing anything right now.
Are you talking about things like digital backgrounds or you know, more matte paintings or anything like that to get things? I mean, you mentioned crowds, but I'm sure there are other things that you're looking at to augment with visual effects potentially.
Yes, our particular series is a very naturalistic human story. You know, it's not a big sci-fi piece. It's a bit more personal. So there is some discussion about that, but this particular show, things need to be more tangible. It's, you know, it's going to be tough to transition to anything with visual effects for this particular project that involves period work and other things. So there are those discussions and, you know, the tutorials online to try to catch up with the possibility of doing this.
Greg, what about you?
Well, it's been a mixture of things. I think, well, similar to Marshall, I'm in a good jurisdiction as far as health goes. If it's, we don't have a lot of cases. We've managed to, I'd say flatten the curve really well. So
You're also in Vancouver.
Yeah, also in Vancouver. So that's, you know, that bodes well for industry opening up, and our provincial government just laid out some rough guides just to slowly opening up. And if things go well and we don't get big spikes, then, you know, we could end up with some part of the industry working again late, you know, in the mid to late summer. But I've been splitting my time at a couple of things. I was not on a project when this happened. I was actually, at the most, I was consulting about a possible second unit, and they kept saying, it's going to happen this day. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure that's not going to happen. I'm pretty sure we're all going to be staying at home. They were very optimistic up to the last possible moment, but I did not leave a big project behind. So it's nice to have a bit of a break in some ways, just creatively, like for the creative reasons, to catch up on other things, catch up on whatever else has been doing. Sometimes, you know, the prep process is obviously sometimes a bit shorter than we would all like, and developing ideas is more challenging in that circumstance. I'm trying to use this time for that purpose. Outside of, you know, supporting friends, helping people that I know that are struggling or having some real difficulties in this time. We're all freelancers, and, you know, I've been through ups and downs in my career, and I think everyone else has. And so we're sort of a bit better trained than most people to handle, you know, disruptions, because we live in a very uncertain business. So I was splitting my time like that. And I'm reconnecting with some old students I was mentoring. I've been on a few panels like this, which I find really useful. It's great to meet people and other ASC members and people over the world that I, you know, only met once or twice. And now everyone's at home. You can actually get everyone on the line. So that's been really fun. It's been educational, and trying to, you know, hopefully use our voices to be part of the conversation about how we go back. I know there's now some standards coming out. The UK government just came out yesterday. And I know our Union 600's got a plan that they've, like a white paper they're bringing to the IA. And it's just be nice to have us all involved in those things to make sure we can maybe take advantage of some of this time to implement things that are both just better just for overall process for what we do, and also to improve the health of what we do, not just in terms of the COVID-19, but, you know, things like work hours and so stuff that can be really challenging for us.
Right. All of you, are you participating in, you know, webcasts and such with your unions? And what about things like, you know, benefits and, you know, what are kind of those issues that you're working with?
They're still in, as far as from my department, and things that will be what we're going to implement when we go back we're still discussing and trying to figure out the best way of going about these things when we all get together. And I mean, it's going to be very interesting when we go back, and we should, I mean, I agree, we should figure out a good plan, and everybody should get involved together at this time when we have this time to figure out what's going to make things better when we do come back.
Well, I mean, let's start talking about the set when you come back. I mean, you know, a few of you who work in production, you know, you're going to be in close proximity with other people. You know, Greg, what, you know, positions on your crew are, you know, the ones that you're going to have to pay extra attention to? For example, the operator, I'd imagine, would be one of them.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to get sort of split, I think, into two different areas. One is going to be the sort of jurisdiction that we're working in, like, let's say where we're being shot, let's say Atlanta, Georgia, or Los Angeles, or wherever. And each state and wherever will have their own sort of ideas of what's safe. I think what our union, what 600 is trying to do, and even 669 and 67 up in Canada, is to try and develop something that's more of a national standard for like our industry, and to apply that over top of what the states would do, because what each state will be different, and I'm sure the producers will be rushing to the state that has the least amount of like, oh, 2 handy wipes and you can go ahead and shoot. They'll want to shoot there, but I think they want to try and do something that can be a national standard, at least the unions do. A couple things that have come up that I've read so far in the briefings are, one, we're going to end up having some type of safety officer that is just really just about working with the contagion of COVID-19 and like re-examining everything we do. And that person will have to sign off. That'll be some type of health professional. We're gonna have a lot of extra sanitation and cleaning of all our equipment. They're gonna be trying to keep all of us separate as much as we can, except when we have to be. This will slow us all down. Like sets won't have 4 departments in them at one time. We'll be rotating through, things like that. People have to be close together are gonna have to have more PPE, like a dolly grip and an operator close together. Maybe more use of remote heads, things like that. There'll be a distinction between when you have to be close, wearing protection. When you're farther apart, we'll probably all be wearing some type of mask anyway. But it's going to require, one, a lot of thought and, some extra things in each department. And then all the contingencies for if someone does become sick, then you have to, like, everyone in that department is then, quarantined for 2 weeks, and you have to bring a separate grip crew in or things like that. Those are complex issues. It is going to affect us on set because we are so close together fairly extensively, I think, and that's going to result in it taking a bit more time. The one thing I think that will be the benefit of it is because it will take more planning, hopefully our prep process for all of us who work in, Hiro will appreciate this, is like we'll have more time to prepare properly, which is always the thing we battle. Like him and I are always looking at each other on set. We're like, well, how are we going to, like, when are you going to rehearse that? I got to figure out how to, we're all, he's nodding, you know what we're talking about. And
yeah, absolutely.
Same with Justin on Watchmen, and we had a huge fight scenes on Watchmen that were, he's working out all the best he can, but we're literally meeting 2 hours before call, 2 hours after call. What have you shot? How do we work it out? All in our off hours. And we'll have to be able to be more streamlined about that. And I think this type of situation with prep and other meetings of all this Zoom etiquette, we're all going to be carrying this forward because as many meetings as possible they can do this way, people will want to be able to do them this way, I think. So.
Yeah, I'm just going to say, there's a document floating around that I've read up here a little bit that talks a little bit like Video Village. What will Video Village look like? Basically you're going to have 3 people there, the scripty, the director, the DP, all 6 feet apart. Everybody else has to stay back away from that. There'll be a separate setup for, the producers to look at. I know I've been on some sets where I can actually log into it from my phone, and I can actually see the playback right there. I think a lot of that's going to happen as well. And mainly just about reducing all of the on-set contact. I mean, they've even been talking about, well, what's craft service going to look like?
It's going to look like nothing.
We were beginning to, when we were filming and we knew things were going to get shut down, we started some kind of process. Our craft service was basically, we had a craft service, but she was completely protected on her own. She had a menu outside of the tent. Nobody could go in. It was one person at a time, and she sort of served everybody. That was sort of the protocol we took before all this started.
I mean, I also like, and as far as like Video Village, that's sort of how it is mostly now anyways. We'll just be farther apart. It'll be 2 10x10 tents, or my DIT will be on the other side of the cart, and he'll be monitored for me separate from his machinery. So we're 6 feet apart. I'll lose my psychological benefit of having my therapist / DIT within close ear when I'm weeping over something I've just done and I don't like. That's the problem. That's going to be difficult, but we can work those things out. I think it's, has anyone here worked in, of course, Segun, you're in the UK. Has anyone here worked in the UK or before? Because there's different work hours there, which is something I'm really interested in.
Amy,
bringing up.
I was prepping series, and there's the standard is a 10-hour day, which is great. A little bit of French hours with the meals, it's there aren't any unions in the UK, so you sort of lack that protection, I think, which is and one of the most important things that we need to discuss. I know we're all chomping at the bit to get back to work, but here in New York and in the UK, it's really not safe, and it feels like a situation of a penny wise, a pound foolish. One person gets sick and it can sort of spread through. So not to be a downer on this discussion, but I think we have to be realistic, and think we have to look towards our unions to protect us, and take a beat and think about, do we really need to go into production on this show right now? Can we hold off another month or two until we have better perspective about what's happening with our health and safety? Because I know this is our livelihood, but these are also our lives, which is more important.
Oh yeah. I mean, I think in every jurisdiction is going to be quite different, right? Because New York was really, I have a friend who's an ER doctor there, and it's a whole different, ball game. So no one wants to be going to a situation where we're going to be, actively unsafe, because that's just not part of the plan for anybody, I don't think.
Yeah, this document I read, they were mentioning whether, I think, before you came on set, you had to go into 2 weeks of self-isolation or quarantine before you could even come on to set, was one of the thought processes. I'm not sure how that would work. I mean, when you come home, I mean, your family's there, or, what happens? But then the same way when you wrap up, you would go into 2 weeks of, quarantine to try to mitigate any issues that might come up.
Yeah, I think only in jurisdictions where the caseload is so low that the decline is happening could you even consider doing any type of work like ours, because it's really not anything with a large outbreak is totally unsafe for any group to get together.
Yeah.
As production opens up, do you think that one of the results of all of this could be that we have different production hubs than we have right now, because people will, gravitate towards shooting in certain, states or countries or whatever the case may be?
It'll just boil down to, money and budgets and where they can save the most and, have the most resources. I mean, one of my biggest concerns is, coming from the art department, the art side, is having the materials and the resources and the vendors that we're used to working with, to have that available, because if that's not available, I can't do my job.
Yeah. And I think the other issue is going to be travel, right? Like even the stuff that came out locally here, I mean, the border's not going to be open for a long time, and the border's not going to be open, especially if there's jurisdictions where there's more outbreaks, for anybody. So the idea of international travel, i.e. actors, for example, who probably don't live where the show is being shot, they won't be coming in anyway. So all that kind of production is, I think, going to be a long way off, because we're not going to be able to have that amount of travel. That's just not going to be permissible.
One of the big topics I am hearing a lot about right now is, people considering, can we do more virtual production? Marshall, what are your thoughts on that? Are you getting more requests or questions about how that might be possible?
Yeah, we definitely are. I work for Fuse FX, and we put together a reel that we're putting out there for clients to look at it, to help them, guide them through the process. Like what is something you can do to move forward? We anticipate there could be a lot more split screen work, if you have to get the actors close. So that means maybe some more blue screen, green screen, crowd replications, full BG crowds, background crowds, virtual sets, more digital matte painting. There's just a lot of stuff. I mean, we're already in ways kind of geared to handle that, because it's kind of how we function, depending upon the film. I mean, some of the major motion pictures, sometimes, the person's just acting in front of nothing, except green. That unfortunately doesn't necessarily lend itself to a good texture of a movie sometimes, because it's good to have that interaction back and forth. But, we're there to let the clients know, there is a way, we can work through this and continue, with the creative process for you to get what you want on the screen. You just have to maybe look at it a different way. I mean, for us, the on-set presence will change a little bit. I mean, gone are the days of sliding up to the, camera guys and say, hey, what lens are you using, to get our camera data and stuff like that. And so things will change a little bit, but, I don't see anything but possibly an increase for us as far as work is concerned.
Well, we've talked about extras a little bit already, but as far as sets, I mean, in addition to CG, is there more talk about, you know, like LED backgrounds and things like that?
Sometimes the right circumstances, you can, you know, deal with LED backgrounds. Unfortunately,
what advice would you give someone who's trying to make decisions like that? What are the things to be considering?
Well, I think what you should do is definitely, you know, to consult your visual effects company that you're working with, or your you know, experts, and you just talk through it. And with anything, I mean, it's the same way when we go into prep on anything, whether it be a feature film or TV. You sit there and talk, and between the stunts, you know, visual effects, special effects, you know, makeup effects, and you kind of make the decision. At the time, what it used to be is like, what is the safest way? Can someone do that stunt and not be endangered? If they, you know, if they can't, then visual effects will assist in that point in time. So I think it's just more dialogue. It's just more communication. I mean, I myself, you know, I'm a fan of getting stuff in camera. So it will be just a talking point. And I think, like I said, I think, you know, things will change, but we'll be back into production hopefully sooner than later with maybe a new approach.
Well, I think it's similar also to the kind of like visual effects, and I'm sure Amy said the same thing, where there are things we couldn't afford to build before because they're only on screen once or twice, but we can afford to make them a VFX or combo something, and, you know, call it part of a location and nod. If you look at, remember, if anyone saw Mindhunter, the David Fincher's show, I mean, they did tons. Amy knows all about it. So all the amount of period stuff they even have to fix, similar to how they did
Zodiac
anyway.
Viper.
Yes, Zodiac. So Zodiac, which was a lot of virtual backgrounds, which again, you wouldn't think of as a visual effects thing. It wouldn't be normally, okay, this has to be effects. But in his mind, you know, he was always pushing the forefront of like, well, how do I create the world I want without having to build all this for certain things? And it's very subtle in those shows and that movie. You can't really tell. And I think that's going to become more of, they're going to come to me and Amy and Marshall like, okay, so now we can't do all these things with 100 people. So what if they're 20 feet farther back? Can they be part of the thing that we're going to be doing anyways to recreate period New York or whatever we're doing? And then I guess I'll hopefully keep us all involved, just because all the three of us want to be, you know, a hero too, so we don't end up losing control of it. And then Amy gets buildings in their show she doesn't want, and we all get, you know, still the look we want. But it, you know, I find that's happening more and more, where we're getting more involved in sort of, you know, pre-production, production, how to solve these problems, and by mixing all these various departments together in advance. I think that's going to continue more.
I definitely agree. There's just, you know, more collaboration, more open communication. I mean, I think, you know, hopefully less barriers, so to speak, you know, not a protection of your particular trade. I mean, that's when I'm on set, like I said, people are like, well, but you're eliminating a shot from you. And I'm like, I'm just here as a filmmaker, and I want to get the best thing that we can. And if it's better for us to do it this way, we should do it that way. If not, do it this way. Just
quality over quantity.
That's right.
It's going to be interesting because, like, with each of us as key department heads, it's not like if one of us gets sick while filming and have to leave for a couple of weeks, it's not, what are you going to do?
Oh yeah,
it's going to be very you have your backup, I guess, that can take over for the 2 weeks that you have to go away if you're feeling sick.
Yeah, and if you can always do this, you know, you can get the download on Zoom if you're, you know, sick at home. But yeah, I mean, I think also
to be on set.
Yeah, somebody you trust. Yeah, somebody you trust, and you can't be there. It has to be somebody you trust enough with actor safety and to supervise. So.
Yeah, I mean, I've often wondered about that, because even when I'm on set, sometimes if I'm trying to see something back in the office, I tell people, hey, just FaceTime me, video FaceTime me, hold it up at your monitor, let's talk through this. I mean, it's not the same, but at least you can get that communication and you see what they're talking about, because a picture's worth 1,000 words.
As far as like getting backups and stuff, that is actually something to consider. I mean, when I think we all work with our crews, right? Like we've all got seconds underneath us, either, you know, it's like assistant stunt coordinator, whoever it's going to be. And, you know, Amy, you'll have people, and I don't know about music though. You might be on your own as far as the talent who can sub for you and compose for you while you're gone. But we all have, you know, we'll have peers and friends that we we Measured Meyer and our friends, and I think we're going to be more in touch with them to make sure we have, backup available, if not within our crew, then with people we know. I suspect also as production comes back, I think the reality is, especially what Amy said earlier, like none of us are going back to work if it's like literally unsafe at all. These practices are going to be the kind of things we're talking about, which we're going to be in for in the long haul anyways, like all of next year, whenever even we have low outbreaks everywhere, they're not going to let us go back to work without having some type of protocols. But part of that's going to be is we're not going to be at the levels of production we were at before. It's just impossible. One, everything's going to take longer. And two, these measures are all going to be expensive to implement. And not every show is going to be able to do it. So I think we're going to have a lower level of production anyway. So hopefully then we'll be able to have, each have a backup, or at least have, okay, if I can't be here, how do I work with this if I've stayed home for 2 weeks? If I'm only on Zoom, how do I keep prepping, or how do I do X and Y? And I think we'll have to be thinking about that.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, because actually the financial side of this entire industry we haven't really touched on yet. And the truth is, we have no idea how many projects will be impacted by this time, and how many projects were due to come out, were due to start filming, which may be cancelled. I mean, here in the UK, we've had Channel 4 already come out and say that they are having to cut a percentage of their workforce to stay afloat. And that was 2 or 3 weeks ago. So it was actually quite early on. And that also impacts all the shows that they've commissioned as well, that there are a percentage that they have to lose. So it's not just about everyone not being able to work now, it's also in the coming month when things get going, there will still be a number of people who sadly aren't able to work because of the financial impact on the entire industry.
That's a very good point.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I can't even begin to, when you mentioned that about not being able to put an orchestra together, my mind just kind of went kaboom, because you're absolutely right. I'm like, I myself, I was either going to be a music major or an art major, and I went with art. But I played music for 15 years, and actually pulled my trumpet out the other day to play Old Canada at noontime on Sunday, when we're supposed to try to celebrate and stuff like that. But just that thought process, it's because every individual person to come together to form that orchestra, it's like, I'm sitting here rolling through my head. It's like, that's kind of what we do with visual effects, because each artist is supplying stuff coming through me. But the conductor, how can a conductor conduct? It just
it's not possible.
It's not possible.
No, that you can't have an orchestra where you have people sitting 2 meters away from each other. It's just not going to work. It's not the sound. But the sound of the orchestra is the fact that you have all of these strings and they're all sat next to each other. And then you have the woodwinds just behind them, and you have the brass. And it's the proximity. The proximity gives you
all of the sound waves,
cohesive sound. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. And making it sound as one rather than as lots of individuals. And as soon as we start separating the orchestra, it's going to sound very different. So it will be interesting to see how that impacts scores going forward. I think that probably it will result in a number of non-orchestral scores, maybe scores that would have been orchestral not being orchestral. And obviously in that realm, really we're talking about some of the biggest films that will be coming out. What will the options be? Because the preference is always still use real musicians as opposed to use the kind of demos or the software that all of us composers use to create demos for directors and producers and so forth, because real musicians still sound the best. So for all those films that would use an orchestra, will they use an orchestra? What will the effect be of this huge blockbuster coming out and not having an orchestra? It will, we have to kind of wait and see what the impact will be.
So, what do you see as the the kind of intermediate steps in your field from where you are today to the point where a full orchestra is again a safe option?
Well, I think, as I say, one thing that a lot of people are trying are having a number of musicians recording individually. And I think that initially at the moment, the idea behind that is to try and get as close as possible to the sound of an orchestra. I think as time goes on, people might start experimenting with it a little bit more. And rather than trying to make it sound like an orchestra, even though it can't quite sound like an orchestra, I think people will start to enjoy the fact that it doesn't, and maybe start to exploit that and start to get creative with the limitations that we face. And I see that continuing for a while, and I think probably there will be a greater acceptance for experimentation and trying something different, because all of a sudden having an orchestra just isn't an option, and it's not an option for anyone, and everyone's going to know and understand that. And so playing around with those other musical ideas, those ideas that you think, well, we'll never get that past the producer or the studio or anything, I think there'll be a little bit more acceptance to those ideas and a little bit more room to experiment and to try and find a different sound. And so there could be positives that come from the limitations that will be imposed naturally. Obviously the downside is musicians not working, and that really is a concern, because for anyone who doesn't have a remote setup where a composer can just send them something and they can record at home, it's a very tough time, because they're not performing, they're not, I mean, some people are still able to teach, which is great, and hopefully as many musicians as possible can get a recording setup at home to be able to keep working. But the slight positive, I think, is, yes, we might see very unusual, interesting and different and creative scores for certain projects, which would maybe have gone down a little bit more of a normal route if that was an option.
Filmmaking is obviously a collaborative process for all of you. What are you finding about how you're collaborating with, you know, your directors and your the rest of your teams, and what do you see as, you know, things continue to move forward? Do you think the way that we collaborate and directors collaborate with their teams will change at all?
I think so, a little bit personally, because I think similarly for bosses who felt like they, you know, they run an office and they feel like, no, I don't like people working from home. I want people in the office where I can see them and see that they're working. And for so many people with that attitude, actually, they now have their workforce at home and they're working, and business is still going on. So I think generally there'll be a bit more acceptance to people working from home, where it won't necessarily be that that's it, everyone will always work from home, but I think that there might be a little bit more room for that where it works for certain organizations and for certain collaborations as well. I was discussing with someone yesterday the idea of remotely working on music, which does happen. There are a number of times where there are directors and composers and they're working and they're not in the same country, let alone city. And there are obviously pros and cons to that, but I think possibly people will be slightly more open to that. I don't think that it will necessarily change the hubs that we have for filmmaking and for composing, particularly in terms of LA. I don't think that will change, but I think that people might be a little bit more accepting to it.
I think we will all have had some practice in this time, actually, and I think that'll make a difference. I mean, so, and also sometimes a production office is one of the least efficient places to be if you're trying to solve problems. I love being out. If we were all on a show together, then I would definitely see Hiro and I would see Marshall. I would go see Amy regularly. I'd be walking around, you know, when things came up and stuff like that. And it's great to be able to have the discussions in person, but we can still do it like this in some ways. And also sometimes some directors don't want to be there unless they have to be there for a meeting for good reason, because they're constantly badgered and they end up not having time to actually, you know, do their proper breakdowns and spend time together. Most of my quality time with directors on a project is usually on the weekend. And if we get together on a Sunday and have lunch and spend like 4 or 5 hours together uninterrupted, that's usually a much more productive time anyway.
Yeah, I think it'll change like the production meeting. I think that's the big thing, because you bring everybody into one room. I mean, I'm just saying together. That, yeah, huddle together. That, you know, that's kind of way. I mean, last week, like I said, we just got this Christmas movie turned over, and so we all logged in, and you know, there's the director, there's everybody involved with it, you know, who needed to be involved with the visual effects. And we ran through the whole script. We annotated on the screen and really discussed what was going on. So, I mean, like I said, for us, I mean, things were digital already. I mean, a lot of, you know, we've been working that way for years. For years, I will sometimes, you know, other companies I've worked at, I'm talking to people in India, people in China. You know, I think it's going to bring other departments on board with that. It's a different way of working, but I think it's also a positive. I mean, you have to maybe look and see what's the positive that comes out of this. And I hope it's more efficiency.
It's forced me to I do previses for all of the fights and things that I do for the sequences that we have. And obviously not being able to bring my team together and work together, I've been taking loads of tutorials and learning visual effects and doing pre-visualization with like 3D, 4D, learning all that stuff. And actually I've had some guys get some mocap suits. We've been trying to work in just like putting things together from home remotely. It's a different way of it, about going it with it, but it's some of it's working, and everybody's just sort of trying to stay on top of like what things are going to be like later, and we can be ready for that if that's where we're going to go. I hope not.
No, I hear you.
I know a lot of you have said you've been doing mentoring or you know, learning online and everything. Would some of you share something surprising that you learned during this time?
Well, maybe I'll start. One thing I was thinking about, I've been, because Watchmen just finished airing at the end of last year, and it sort of missed the Emmy cutoffs. We're doing some press to promote the show for the Emmys this year, which will be a virtual Emmys, of course. And I thought it'd be an interesting exercise. I was talking to Stephen Williams, who directed one of the episodes, the black and white episode we did. I was just going through all the setups, like, could we make that episode today? And what would be the big changes apart from the how we work thing, but like what shots would have to be done totally differently, or would we need, you know, Marshall's help in to sort of do in other ways? And it was a pretty small list of things that would be really difficult, like crowd things like that. But it could be done. It would certainly take longer. But I think that's an interesting sort of exercise I hadn't thought about doing. Is like, let's look at an example of something of work that we've all done, we've liked, and like what would it look like based on whatever these new methods working are for next year they're going to be. And we could still do the quality of work, I think. I think that's definitely possible. Just take longer.
Yeah.
I'd have to say it's been so busy in our industry. It's really been nonstop these last few years that I haven't had a chance to take a break. I'm just overlapping project after overlapping project. And now's the time to sort of take a beat and really, you know, connect with, I don't work with other production designers directly. So to be able to have a forum like the Production Designer Collective where 30 of us from around the world are talking about our issues and, you know, solutions and the projections of our craft has been really great. Kind of step back. And so in a way, it's sort of a break I've been craving, but I didn't want it to happen this way.
No. You didn't want to sacrifice hundreds of thousands of people to have your break?
No. You know, there were so many conversations in the Scout van about, you know, what a boom, and you know, so many streaming platforms and so much content, and we're just, you know, producing things like crazy that it's you know, it's surreal that this is suddenly stopped and halted.
What is the most difficult decision each of you has had to make since this started? And again, this could be a business decision, or maybe it's not.
I mean, for me, it was just like, you know, I at some point decided not to wear shoes. So, you know.
I thought you were going to say pants.
I know. That's why I put the pause in there. So, yeah, but you know, for me, I mean, unfortunately, a lot of my coworkers and stuff, we were talking about how actually for us right now in this particular time, we feel that we're busier than we've ever been because we don't have those normal little breaks we have while we're doing on the work. We know that you know, come 2 months, 3 months from now, we might be out of work. We might not have, because the hoppers gets emptied and it has to get refilled. So, you know, there is some thought process about that. I mean, I already have my plans. You know, I'm going to re-roof my cabin, tear it off and do it. So, you know, but as far as, you know, for me, the actual work right now hasn't really changed. And I think it's just going to be a situation where we're going to have to see when work dries up and how quickly it comes back in. I mean, since I do on-set stuff, I mean, I'll be kind of the first guard of that going into that. Which, you know, does make you stop and think for a second, you know, what is that new world order going to look like, so to speak. But generally speaking, you know, I just want us to get all through it safely and move on and try to get back to some semblance of normalcy.
It's gonna be interesting. I mean, I've had a lot of work the last 4 years back to back, and I haven't, unfortunately, there's no work here in Colorado. So I've been either in LA or Atlanta, majority is where I've been. And to be able to actually be home right now, I'm using this time. It's what I'd be doing anyways. If I wasn't working in between jobs, this is what I'd be doing, but I'm actually getting to spend more time at my home and do things around the house that I've been wanting to do for so long. Last year, I spent 3 weeks in this house. So it's nice to actually be home with the family and all of that. So that's difficult. I'm learning to farm, so that's something I can move to, maybe. And I have in a farming community, so.
Okay.
Yeah, I've got my backyard garden in already. So I got my peas up and I got my corn growing. So I mean, it's not a big plot, but at least it's going, and I'm just fighting the critters to stay out of there. So.
Yeah, and I think what Amy said too is true. I mean, I don't know almost any of my, you know, peers that I work with. Everyone's been basically doing nonstop for the past 3 or 4 years, and I was in the same boat. And I took a break after the last project at the end of the year. I didn't expect it to suddenly become the entire world taking the break, but for that reason, because I was burning out. Like I'd done almost 3 or 4 years straight, almost none of it at home. I mean, I did like Belfast, Northern Ireland, then Toronto, then Atlanta for a year. I mean, just all over the map. And then it's been, that was a good decision to make. I'm glad I made it. And now it's, you know, hopefully come back stronger when we get to go back.
It does sound, I mean, everyone that I've spoken to who is a creative and working in this industry is doing something, is somehow investing in themselves or the work that they're doing, either very directly and practicing. And I know that I'm doing a lot of that. I'm working on my setup and my system and making sure it's as efficient as it can be, so I can be as fast as I can be when those crunchy kind of times and deadlines come in. Or it's just, for some people, it's just kind of getting back into the love of sitting down and watching a TV series or a film. I mean, there's so many people who spend a lot of time working in this industry and actually don't get to watch much at all because they're so busy. And this is their opportunity to catch up on absolutely everything. The difficulty now is that there's so much stuff out there. It's actually impossible. But it does mean that there are a lot of fantastic things to watch. There's a lot of fantastic filmmaking going on, and there's an opportunity to watch. There's a lot of nostalgia. I'm seeing a lot of people who are rewatching classics or films that they loved from years and years and years ago, or people who have a classic movie night and then they have a more modern movie night, and then they have, you know, a rom-com evening. It's just, it's so interesting to see what everyone is doing, but it seems that a lot of people are really investing in themselves and also enjoying having a bit more free time with family.
Family, that's right.
Family, yeah, for sure. Something that I've been thinking a lot about was also being involved in conversations like this and not sort of just being on the sidelines. I think that's something that obviously we all felt about being. And Karen, I just want to bring up one thing about the one thing I'm hoping to bring back in that Amy mentioned earlier was like how they work in the UK with the shorter days. And I know lunch will become a big problem with as we come back. And like on Game of Thrones, it was shot in Northern Ireland. Again, no unions for camera, so they made their own deal. And you know, the most important thing for the crew after the first season was to be able to go home at a reasonable hour on Friday. A lot of them had families. A lot of them would fly back to London. And so they want to finish early. So they're, instead of, giving into HBO, which wanted, 12-hour days and overtime, they said, well, what if we do a 10-hour day? We do a walking lunch, don't take a break, except break people to have their lunch within a 2.5-hour window, and keep the shooting going. Especially for places like Northern Ireland, where if you're working outside, lunch is a big of a deal. You're getting in a van, going down a hill, you're in a remote location. You save all that time, you save the momentum lost. And it worked out really, really well and it had a couple of side benefits, which everyone I know that's shot there, all the DPs I know and directors, start to quite like it for a couple of reasons. One, I think all of us have had friends on shows that are doing very long days, like regularly, like 14, 15 hours, which is kind of inhuman after a while. Even for actors, that it becomes totally insane. When you do a 10-hour shoot day, even if with an hour early, let's say your actor gets picked up at, 5:45, get their wig on, everything else, rehearse at quarter to 8 in the morning. They do their 10 hours. They're done at 6. They have their stuff off by 6:45 and they're done. Their day is still sort of reasonable. And that's someone who's in every scene and has a wig on. And it creates a certain momentum with the crew, because everyone knows they're going to finish at a certain time. And they kind of know how much work is expected that day, which creates a really different thing. It's actually a manageable amount to keep in your head as well, because you're doing 2 big scenes or whatever you're going to do that day in 10 hours, which creates a different urgency to everybody, because they do want to finish on time and they don't want to be the person that's responsible for going over. And they want to be, it keeps a good momentum going. And it's the same as when the sun's going down. You're amazed how fast we all frantic. When I've got the meter out, I'm watching the sun go down like a comet with a tail on the back of it, freaking out. It's not quite that type of thing, but the crew gets used to what that feels like. And then, you have a good start to every day, and it really, really has huge benefits. And if you do that kind of schedule, you take 4 hours off of your turnaround every day from Monday to Thursday, which means you're starting 4 hours earlier on the Friday than you would be. That's the difference between starting at 2 p.m. and starting at 10 a.m. And if you're going into, that's like finishing at 8 p.m. on a Friday, which would be great. On Thrones, it would finish at 6 p.m. on a Friday. We do 8 to 6 almost every day. And it allowed me to have a meeting after work, not be exhausted. I could come in early. I could even do a 2-hour pre-light after the shooting day and not have an insane day. And the show could literally not function without me being able to do that. And it's a really good way to work. On the 15-hour day, the crews start to know that. They know it's going to be a grind, and everyone, ends up working accordingly, because they need to pace themselves physically and mentally. And that creates a certain, inertia, because everyone knows they're going to be worked to the, till they're completely dead. And that's really not a great way for anybody to live. And, we'll have shorter longevity in our business if we keep it that way.
And even before all of this started, that was an issue in the unions, just about keeping work hours reasonable.
Yeah, people falling asleep driving home, right? Yeah, people falling asleep driving home. I mean, also changing your work schedule is one of the worst things you can do to the human body, and all this, scientific studies will tell you that. And Haskell Wexler worked his whole life trying to implement the 12-hour maximum.
That's right.
A 10-hour continuous day with a 2.5-hour, window for lunch creates that by de facto. Even if you come a bit early, let's say come an hour early. I have my breakfast. I have time to chit chat with everybody, get comfortable, whatever I'm going to do in my pre-morning routine. Shoot for 10. I can still do something afterwards, and I'm still within 12.
It's yeah. Oh, go ahead.
On the series we were prepping in London, we were going to have one director throughout who was the showrunner, and our line producer was able to put together a schedule that had us shooting 5 days one week, 4 days the next on 10-hour days. So we started talking about, because we were shooting on film, okay, let's start watching dailies together at the end of the day,
Exactly.
With those 2 hours, and let's, go back to sort of old school filmmaking. And, that doesn't coincide with social distancing, but for me, as far as a film collaborator and creatively, to be in a room with, the DP and, even the dolly grip, if anyone who wants to be there to sort of hash out the day and see how things went, sounds amazing, because I think we've just been trying to do more and more for less and less, that this might be a nice time to step back. And, like Greg said, I mean, there's very little value on families or our personal time in this industry. And, it's been great to see my family.
Yeah. And think of how much smarter you and I, Amy, and Hiro, everybody are when we have enough sleep in those quality times. I mean, I don't know many directors that are any good on hour 14. They're not making good decisions. They're all exhausted, the same as I. But if they know they have 10, you know, and even if they want to spend more time, that hour before, the three of us together, you know, worrying about something for next week, we're awake. We're not dragging our feet in after working 20 hours, like not being able to think clearly. We can actually have a quick conversation and really, you know, make some meaningful contribution to the quality of what we're doing.
Yeah,
No,
and you know, with this this sort of 9-day schedule and having every other Friday off, it gives you a day to, you know, catch up on these meetings, not do it, you know, after a 12-hour day. It gives you a chance to, you know, scout a location that you've lost because of whatever reason, or so I think we need to sort of really push that as a value from below the line, as these budgets are and these new, you know, practices are coming together. I think it's, you know, a chance to kind of get in there and make our environment better.
Stunt folks would appreciate it. I mean, they usually are brought in early first to get ready because they have to be wigged and make them look like they're actors, the doubles anyways. And then they sit all day, and it's inevitable. They're usually pushed all the way to the end of the day, and they could sit there for 15 hours before they do a big stunt. And we're in charge of all their safety, and we would appreciate that for sure.
That's exactly the way I try and make it every day, to make sure it's as most dangerous as possible at the end of the day. No, exactly, because it's like it shouldn't be. It even shouldn't be a 15-hour day anyway, right? You shouldn't. At the end of the day, should not be at the end of your tether unable to work. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
That's the whole point, right? Like if it's the end of 10 hours, okay, that's reasonable, but like it shouldn't be hour 17.
What are you hearing about when the unions might start releasing these best practices and guides and things like that?
Yeah.
They're still working on it.
I think they're all presenting them to IAA sometime this week. I know 600, John Lindley, our president, just gave a little video on our website describing the Health and Safety Committee coming up with a white paper idea. And they're going to bring that to the IAA, and then they're all the locals will hash out something with the international, I think, to some degree. I know for sure the 10-hour day is probably not going to be part of that because there's a lot of entrenched things that people don't want that. But I don't think it's ever too late to stop that push.
Anyone have any closing thoughts before we wrap up?
Oh, just the one thing, I just want to echo what Amy said earlier is, as much as we wanted, it's nice to see everybody, and this has been a fun conversation. I miss these conversations with all of my collaborators. Is the one thing that is kind of gone. But you know, if anything, this is a really, really, you know, unprecedented kind of terrifying crisis for a lot of people, and it's also a lot of psychological wear and tear on people, right? Because it's very difficult emotionally. I mean, people live in districts where there's a lot of illness, and you know, that type of wear and tear is also going to be present when we come back, even if we come back when things are better and much more safe before we're allowed to come back to work. But working, you know, with all this type of safety of mind is also going to be more difficult, and we have to be mindful of that's going to take a toll on people, and that's why things like your changing work hours will also be even more important, because people are going to be carrying this extra thing with them always about being extra safe and all that. And I think that's really important, because if we've learned anything this last 2 weeks, last 7 weeks, it's, you know, health is number one. You know, job one is be alive. Job two, keep everyone else alive, you know, and love. You know, job three, maybe be able to pay the bills.
It's a great way to wrap this up.
Yes, very well said. So thank you all for taking the time out to have this conversation with us. Thank you to our viewers, and everyone, please stay safe.